Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with DrCybersecurity. Would you believe this is the 21st episode? And this evening, I have a terrific friend of mine, Dr. Chiquita Howard-Bostic.
Hello, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here this evening. Just to tell you a little bit about myself before we get started, I am the Associate Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity at Shepherd University, which is located in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, about an hour and 20 minutes from Washington, D.C. I pride myself in doing diversity work. I've traveled around the world, working with children, working with adults, doing a training called Help Bridge, which is an empowerment program. And outside of that, I love to roller skate, I love bowling, and I just love being that down-to-earth person that you can talk to about very difficult situations. Thank you.
Wow, that is wonderful. I didn't know about that aspect of you. I mean, my God, it's wonderful. We meet every time and I learn a little bit more about you. That is wonderful. Well, congratulations on that new promotion. That is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
What do you want to talk about?
I think I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be an ally, and also I think just how you can position yourself to support underrepresented people during such a interesting political climate that we have right now going on. So the first thing that I want to talk to people about is pretty much, what is an ally? And I think that word will show up here or there. An ally is someone who makes a commitment. So you need to make a commitment and an effort to actually recognize your privilege. And so these are entitlements that you receive through history because of these positions that you have based upon your gender, your class, your race, even sexual identity. And once you understand your privilege, then you try to work in solidarity with groups that have been identified as oppressed groups, especially groups that struggle for justice. Allies have to understand something really important. And this is that it is in your own interest to end all forms of oppression. And you can benefit in concrete ways by actually taking the time and energy and effort to understand difference and to embrace the people around you. And most importantly, you commit yourself to your own complicity. So you want to make sure that you are behaving appropriately and that every action that you engage in is one that you're personally responsible for. So you actually can contribute to social justice by making the right decisions to communicate effectively and respectfully with other people, because your best friends, the people you interact with on a regular basis, they see you as a role model. So they mimic and mock everything that you do. So if you take responsibility for your role in social justice activism, then you can actually change the world. You can actually make the society a more just society. And if everyone were to think that way, we would be in a better position than the one that we're in right now.
Now, that is fascinating. So one of the things that you might be interested in is there is actually right now the World Championship of Public Speaking going on right now. Toastmasters is a global organization, and I was watching some of those contestants. So at this level, these are some amazing people that think about problems and then they prepare a speech in such a way that it really changes your mind. I heard one of those speeches today, and that was where a Greek person was an immigrant in Australia and was being mocked. And that was when he was 11 years old. But what happened was that the professor, instead of scolding them and trying to basically say, hey, you're wrong and all that, took an oyster and basically said, the only way to get a pearl in this oyster is to put a foreign object, a piece of sand in it. If you don't put that sand in there, that pearl will never get formed. So showing people that there is that extra benefit, something that neither of you could ever have achieved alone. So this has been the thing that I always observed even in my own life. Part of the reason that I've always surrounded myself with people who are different than me, and that not necessarily in terms of looking for oppressed groups or whatever groups, I basically was always looking for differences of opinion because I felt like that would make me stronger, that would make me better. So I think that is the oyster example is a very powerful example. I thought that could be one possibility. The other thing is sometimes to think about that sometimes we criticize people for, say, being the way they are. And I think that is also wrong. We kind of need to accept them the way they are. If they are racist, well, let's accept them as racist, but let's show them a more positive way of being a racist. And I believe there are positive ways of being a racist, because if you truly believe that you're superior, why don't you show it in your work? Instead of trying to kill somebody else, why don't you show your superiority in your work? And if you can do that, guess what? Society benefits, everybody benefits. I actually had that conversation with a racist who was a neighbor of mine, and I basically told him, I said, look, I have no problem with your racism, this is fantastic, but do it in a better way. Because I told him, I said, if you have a superiority complex, that is nothing wrong with that. I have a superiority complex myself. What do you think of that?
Well, I think the only problem with telling someone that what they're doing is magnificent, the only reason that that becomes a challenge or an issue is if they are treating people in a way that brings them down. So that's the idea of undoing oppression. So it's not necessarily about a superiority complex. It's about how you treat others when you engage that complex. So I can think all day that I am phenomenal at whatever I do, and I can also think I'm the best, but I don't have to make you feel like you're the worst while I'm engaging that. And that is racism, is the power act of taking your privilege and using it to suppress someone else's ability to react and respond. So if you believe you are phenomenal, that is ethnocentrism. That in fact is not racism. And racism is the act of oppressing or putting someone else down. So at the moment that you approve of racist behavior, you're not saying that your superiority is phenomenal. You're saying that your capacity to help someone else never move where you are standing or move in a position, that is actually what is excellent. So you have to be very careful about how you use that term racism. And that's the challenge, that people sometimes don't understand what that term actually means and the history of oppression and the history of privilege and how those privileges are actually utilized in ways that are designed to hurt and to stop other groups from being socially mobile. So I can never approve of someone engaging in a position where a part of that process is pushing somebody else down intentionally.
How do you tackle that? What is your research and learning?
Well, I think
how can that guide us?
So I think the concept of implicit bias is really important, because at the point that we really understand our privileges and we understand what it is that we do well, then we're able to think critically about how there are unintended consequences that are based upon our everyday actions and reactions. Now, we can't stop anything. We can't say, oh, well, I'm going to do really well, and so if I win the competition, you're going to lose. Well, that's the given. If you're the best at it, then somebody else is going to come in second. But when I'm trying to move up, I don't place booby traps down so that other people can lose. And so there's a huge difference between engaging in behavior that detracts from mobility and engaging in power movements and making yourself excel in a way that where you bring other people up, you share information, you provide opportunities. Well, I've already made it here. I'm okay with providing someone else with the recipe because they'll never be the first. I did it first. and I'm going to continue to progress, because while I'm progressing, I'm coming up with new ideas, new innovations that hopefully somebody can see that yellow brick road and walk down it and maybe move on. Now, I do understand that, again, there are unintended consequences for success, but what we're talking about here is beyond diversity, which is tolerating the engagement with people. That's what diversity is all about. You being in this room and me saying, okay, I guess you can be here, you know, but I'm still going to glow. But then saying, hey, I'm here and you're here. Let's look at this shell that you talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at this shell. Let's see how we can work together. Not saying, okay, I see your shell, I'm going to kick it. I'm going to kick your shell, and then I'm going to find somebody else who has a shell, and I'm going to force them to work with me in poor conditions, and I'm going to utilize their shell to allow me to grow. And then after I get whatever I need out of that shell, I'm going to kill you.
Okay, so the one thing that
So this is what we're talking about.
I understand. So one of the things that you've probably read the literature on teamwork, and one of the things that I see happening in any time you bring two people together, it doesn't matter what they are, there is a period of storming that happens. And I've seen that with two employees. Fantastic employee, I hired a brand new employee, superstar, but these two won't get along. Particularly the guy feels like she's always pointing out my flaws. So basically what I had to do was I had to intervene and create a situation where they're constantly talking, but I'm also pointing out that she is pointing out your flaws so that our entire team and your own product can actually be better. Because the way you're creating the product, yes, you can be a superstar programmer, but the product that you're creating is still not where it needs to be. She's the one who's that quality control person who actually takes your product a notch higher than you alone could ever take it. That is the concept of, similar concept of the oyster and the pearl. But I didn't put it that way, but I basically put myself in that situation where the communication and the storming and the norming had to happen, because at some point these people have to come to a normalizing relationship where they recognize that both together are more powerful than them divided. And that is the conversation that still needs to happen. See, I still believe that both people have to accept each other at some point and decide to talk.
So do you understand in this example that the very first term or concept that I introduced was being an ally? Do you understand how you, in this case, are the ally? You are the person who's committed to recognizing elements of privilege and then utilizing those and allowing people to work in solidarity, right? So someone feels like they're being oppressed. And so in turn, you are revisioning and helping them to understand how they can work effectively together. And you're building upon both of their strengths to allow growth to happen. This is what an ally is.
Facilitated conversation and
That's right.
Got it. Okay. All right.
And so again, going back to, I have to keep repeating this, understanding what these terms actually mean, the history of these terms. So of course, someone could try to deconstruct concepts, because that happens in society all the time. People take words and they try to create something new. But you have to be very careful with the deconstruction of a term, especially if you wanted to use racism as an empowerment tool. It's such a nasty derogatory term with such an invasive history that if you would want to talk about this empowerment, I would give it a different term. You know, I wouldn't try to utilize this old term that is so abusive to express this phenomenal oysterish, holistic approach that you're presenting in terms of creating ally work in the workplace.
Oh, nice. So what term would you suggest? I mean, that is good idea.
I mean, I like to talk about inclusivity excellence. So some people say people who come together to create a difference, they are your inclusivity support staff or your inclusivity team. So you're talking about collaboration building or inclusivity excellence. If you could come up with something that ties those concepts.
Well, what I have used is the term of the team. I basically said, look, in a baseball team, I would never win if I had all first basemen in that team.
Mm-hmm.
I need a first baseman, a third baseman, a shortstop, and an outfielder. I need a pitcher. I need every one of those roles. And that's how I see the diversity and the difference and building a solid team and a winning team. That is the concept I've always tried to use. And it has sort of worked for me. But I think in some cases, there are some people who will never, ever get there because, I don't know, maybe they have some other kind of a hang up. But generally, people who want to at least focus on the goal and want to do it, at least in this particular case, that person who was resisting after 6 months, he actually sent me an email saying that he really appreciated my managerial role and leadership because he had never seen anything like it. Because other times, people had just dumped it on him to solve it with the team members and never. So what you have just introduced is that the facilitator role or the team manager kind of a role is a very critical role in resolving these kinds of situations, right?
Mm-hmm. Very important, and more so than that, I think it's important for us to understand that, you know, all of these players that are involved, nobody is ever going to have a perfect situation where everybody is going to follow your leadership process. I had a conversation with a colleague this morning who said, oh my goodness, there are some people who work with us who are just not following any of the protocols as they should, and it's going to make us look bad. And I told her, I said, you can't spend your great energy worrying about this small collection of people who aren't doing what they're supposed to do. The people who are in charge, they will see that, but you have to focus your great positive energy in the direction of those people that are making good decisions so that you can use that extra energy that you have to grab ideas and to spend time communicating with them. If you waste your time caught up in that angst and anxiety and frustration from those people who are not doing, instead of letting the person in that lane address that challenge, right? Then you are just taking away from your potential growth in your movement. I'm not saying that she shouldn't take a stand or comment or whatever, but if she's taking time soaking over and over during the day about these no-doers, then she's wasting the positive energy time that she has. Right. You send that to the person who needs to address it. If you feel like you're going to take a stand, you take a stand, but you compartmentalize and you focus on the people who bring positive energy. Those are the allies. Those are the people who are going to provide strength. And then hopefully together, there's a solution or there's an energy that will do something about these people. But if it doesn't, sometimes those are the people who are just not going to do.
So this is a wonderful thing to meet, talk with you and chat with you every time, because I learn something, I get inspired, and it is just amazing. So it was absolutely amazing catching up with you.
Thank you.
And I will now going to bring in Lucy Muiruri from Kenya, and we will catch up with you again, Dr. Chiquita Howard-Bostic, during the networking. Thank you again.
Thank you. Hello, Lucy. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having me, Dr. Hasib. I'm Lucy Miruri. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. I think one of the unique things about Nairobi is the only city which has got a national park. And we have very good weather. I've been to the US and I think I longed to be back home.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, so my background is in computer. I did have a bachelor's in computer science, and then I specialized in information security then. I've been in the field for 15 years. I began as a system administrator, then I became an information security administrator, and since 2006, I've been in the information security field. I've had the privilege of working for various organizations like the biggest telecom company that we have, which is actually the biggest in East and Central Africa. I've worked in the banking sector, and I've worked even in the NGO sector. I've actually worked for World Vision International, which has its offices in Monrovia, in the US. And right now, I am working in a startup. I am helping businesses to understand cybersecurity as a business enabler, not as a cost center. Yes.
That is wonderful. That is exactly the way I have always done this. And although I've never actually separated security, I've always said that anytime you do information strategy or digital strategy, security is an aspect of it. And so you can never separate it. And so I never separated it. That is absolutely wonderful. Great to meet you. Thank you for coming, Lucy. What do you want to talk about?
I'd like us to discuss the emerging trends in cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. Most of organizations, right from the United Nations to the World Bank, to even individual corporate organizations, mm-hmm. they are all adopting a cloud-first strategy. Mm. And when I began in cybersecurity, I realized network security was a big deal then. Mm-hmm. But now I'm just wondering, with this cloud-first a strategy, how is it going to affect the cybersecurity career and the required skills in the next few years? What are your views?
So this is almost the same kind of a question that I had when Novell kind of was being pushed out by Microsoft. I basically said, look, we're going into a more complex world, and there will be triple the jobs that there are now. And so I feel like as a digital strategist and a professional in this kind of a space, it is time for us to celebrate, because the idea that just going to the cloud is somehow going to reduce the cost. Yes, it reduces cost, but it also increases the complexity. And most people forget about that part. They forget about the fact that when you go to the cloud, you have to have diverse clouds. In other words, you cannot put all your eggs in one basket, one cloud, or one vendor, because we have heard of vendor lockouts, vendor go out of business, right? This could happen. Or vendor increases their prices all of a sudden. What do you do? Because at some point, you're going to have to face that situation, and it happens all the time. I've never done cloud without doing diverse clouds or having replication from one vendor's cloud to another vendor's cloud. That is the only way I've always done it.
Okay, that's interesting. So if today you're to compare the kind of skills you are looking for 15 years ago in a cybersecurity professional compared to the kind of skills you'll be looking for today, and an organization has fully adopted the cloud, what would be the major difference?
The major difference would still be that they need to be contract savvy. They really need to be able to understand how to share the risk, because there is a risk that is now being shared between multiple vendors. Where does it end? Where does it begin? I mean, this complexity is definitely there, which a typical 15 years ago, none of these people would have to worry about that. So that the technology skills are going to be different. You're going to have to rethink how your help desk is, all those levels of support, everything has to be rethought. So it still needs to be a strategy kind of a person. You will still need that aspect in your organization and not just technology people.
Okay. According to the Security magazine, it had indicated that actually in July 2020, that there is the US is having an acute cybersecurity skills shortage. Mm-hmm. And as much as people would tend to think that the cybersecurity skills shortage is global, mm-hmm. I think it is not global, because in Kenya, we've got certified ethical hackers, we've got people with certified information systems auditor, certified information security manager, CSSP, who don't have jobs. I think this is an opportunity for us to have outsourcing.
I don't think that that is necessarily the issue over there, because even in the United States right now, I know of people with master's degrees and they don't have jobs either. Part of the problem is we kind of talked a little bit about this power situation with Dr. Chiquita Howard-Bostic. The problem is that the wrong people are in power in most organizations. This is not true just in the United States. This is true all over the world. The kinds of people that are in power are the finance kinds of people. And in the modern organization, they're not very qualified to run the modern organization, because the modern organization is all about digital strategy. Those finance kinds of people see people as an expense, and they treat people as an expense even in the accounting system. So they will never hire people. Now, the funny thing is, these same people will blow a whole bunch of money on equipment and machines, but they won't spend it on the people. Don't ask me how that psychology works, but maybe it has to do with the accounting system. Maybe they can depreciate and that machine could be used as a capital asset. I don't know what logic they use, but this hiring problem is global. These people won't hire the people. They will go to their vendor, ask for some technology solution. They're doing the cloud the same way. They're not hiring the right people to do the cloud. They're just outsourced to the cloud, then worry about the issue later. This is happening all over.
Okay, interesting to hear.
The power structure has to change. That's why I've been saying that the people that are more qualified in digital strategy, they need to be in positions of power. It's the same reason why we're having the breaches all over. You hear about breach after breach after breach. The issue isn't technology. The issue is the people. The people in power are unqualified, and they are excluding the qualified people, because as soon as they hire the qualified people, the fact that they're unqualified would be even exposed in a bigger way. I've had situations where people who graduated from my programs or even were studying in my programs but hired and found that their chief information security officer that they're working for has some Joe Blow degree, and maybe not even a degree, and doesn't know much, and then is very threatened by these people coming out with qualifications. You talked about the certifications, all of these things. Many people are in positions of power without any of those qualifications.
Okay. I think that it's just going to be a matter of time until organizations realize that they have to change their strategy. Because I think also with the development of regulation like the GDPR, I think it's going to be a costly affair to the organizations to if they have breaches. Then another aspect I find very interesting about your profile is the fact that you are a cybersecurity professional. You are also into personal branding and public speaking. How can a cybersecurity professional be able to combine those skills to create multiple streams of income?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I am publishing in this book, because this is the thing that I was seeing. I was seeing this massive problem that you talked about, and in some ways, Dr. Chiquita also talked about that same kind of a problem. The problem is that there are people in positions of power that are excluding a lot of other people. So the only way I thought that I could defend without trying to solve it at a macro level, I cannot solve it at the macro level, but at the micro level, what I can do is I can help people develop their sources of power, which is their personal brand. You see, in the old world, a person's power was defined by their position in an organization. So if they rose to a particular position of power in an organization, that was their position of power. And if they ever lost it, they would become nobody immediately, right? And so that is why people were very, very protective about maintaining that positions of power. However, in this modern world, if you start developing your multiple streams of income, so let's say you publish books, you do talks, you do all kinds of things, and then you start creating educational content, and at some point conferences are sponsoring your content. So for example, right now, this Conversations with DrCybersecurity, this thing can be put in a conference as a segment where it becomes interesting. We talk and all that, because not too many people can put together a conversation like this and have it be useful, educational, but also entertaining. Because at the end of the day, if you have a single speaker going on and on for 1 hour, it's going to be boring as hell. And many conferences have those kinds of boring sessions. So these kinds of things can change things, and that creates additional sources of power, branding, and when you start to create that power and your brand has value, guess what happens? Now you're going to get a company that's going to come after you. Instead of you going for a job, multiple companies are going to come after you to affiliate with that Lucy Muiruri brand, right? As soon as they know that if that brand is associated with my company, the value of my company goes up. And that is what needs to happen. So for example, right now, even if I don't work for any organization, my brand value does not change, because my brand value right now is independent of any organization. As a matter of fact, every time I affiliate with any organization, the value of that organization goes up, the value of the program goes up. So that's how you do it. That creates your ability to also negotiate your salary, your compensation, and all of those things based upon the value you bring. You can negotiate promotions that way. And that is what I'm talking about in this book, because I realized that I have to write this book. I've been working on it, toying about it for several years, but recently, this pandemic and all the layoffs and all the situations, I started thinking, my God, people need this desperately. So I started talking about it at various events and conferences, and they started saying, oh yeah, this makes sense. Because that's one of the things that I was able to do. Because I don't want to work for oppressive kinds of situations. And that happened to me. Recently, I had to leave an organization because all of a sudden, I'm reporting to a PhD in English, and I didn't want that situation, who was also intending to micromanage me. And I'm like, I'm the expert here. I don't want to be micromanaged. You either leave me alone, you can be my boss, but you cannot micromanage me.
Oh, that's interesting.
But because I have that independent source of power, I was able to say no. Because we often enable these situations also. So I bet you the situation where I didn't tolerate it, what will that do? It will make the organization rethink, because I'm sure that as more people start to develop their independent sources of power, the oppression will have to stop at some point, because the organization is simply not going to make enough money to sustain all those people. Remember, if we bring in the money, because we're the ones bringing in the money, then the people above us who either won't teach, they're just pure administrators, right, earning 2-3 times our salary, they won't be able to sustain, because if we are the ones bringing in the money, we refuse to bring in the money for them, that can change the power equation. And I believe that's what needs to happen more and more.
Yeah. So we need to build our own brand. Correct. So that even companies would want to be associated with us.
Exactly. The concept is called getting control of your income so that you can determine your outcome.
Excellent. Maybe have one more question.
Yes, please.
I found that depending on somebody's character, personality, and even their strengths and weaknesses, you find like in cybersecurity, you have some people who are more likely to do well in the technical side of cybersecurity, that is in ethical hacking, application security, and the like. And then there are others who do very well in cybersecurity governance, risk, and compliance. But you find most organizations at the entry level, they hire for the technical skills. So we end up with these people growing up the ladder, and they end up at the top doing governance, risk, and compliance. What tips would you give someone who is good in governance, risk, and compliance? Yes, they want to get in at that level of governance, risk, and compliance, but they have not grown through the ladder.
Interesting. This is a very difficult question because I sincerely believe to succeed in the field, you have to know a little bit about a lot of things. I still believe you may need to specialize, but I believe every person needs to have that broad background. And that is one of the reasons my first book, the Cybersecurity Leadership book, I believe is important for anybody. It doesn't matter what aspect of cybersecurity they're in, because it gives you that broad understanding of the field. And you also know that all of those parts are important because you cannot just do one part and hope to succeed. So you just mentioned that. They hire the technical people, but they ignore the policy people and they ignore the leadership people. Sometimes they ignore the people altogether. They don't even get the technical people. They just buy the technology, right? And then hope that it works. So I think the issue is that the business people, all of these people really need to understand the whole field. Part of the problem is that the business people are not getting re-educated. They are going into the business schools or whatever that were built in the 1970s or so. So they don't understand how to run modern organizations. We're in the fourth industrial revolution. They are still governing and becoming executives in the old world. And that's the other big problem. So I think that everybody needs to have that broad background and then they can specialize. It's almost like having what I call is a T personality. You need to be able to have that broad ability to apply and know about a lot of things, even though you may specialize in one or two things, which is the stem of the T. Okay. That's the way I am. See, I have that broad background, but I don't really know programming, but I know what kind of a programmer or what I need the outcome to be to hire the right kinds of programmers, okay? But I don't have to be a programmer myself, but I know that I need that. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes. So I think that is very clear that for all of us in cybersecurity, we somehow need to understand, I would say, a 360-degree view.
Yes.
But then after that, specialize.
And also understand that we're always working for the mission of the organization. So if I go from one organization to another, I cannot do the exact same thing. I need to understand the new organization mission, risks, people, their history, culture, what they have, and then adapt my strategy to the new organization. So that is the other mistake that a lot of people make, is that they go from one organization to another and they try to do the exact same thing. That doesn't work. See, the mission, most people don't understand that one either. But it was fantastic to talk to you, Lucy. We really covered a lot of interesting topics. So thank you very much for joining us from all the way from Kenya. And now I am going to bring in Vivek Rajan. Vivek, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Super honored to be here. So I'll just give a little bit of a background about myself first. So yeah, I'm Vivek. I'm a recent graduate, actually, May 2020. So I'm one of the COVID graduates. Graduated with my undergraduate. So I went to school in Tampa, and how I basically got interested in cybersecurity. So my bachelor's is actually in criminal justice, which at first point, people are like, criminal justice, cybersecurity, they're two different things, but nope. They're very correlated. And so during a lot of my classes, for example, we would talk about my law enforcement or like counterterrorism classes or whatever. We would talk about the idea that cybersecurity is going to be one of the biggest issues facing, like, that criminals are going to use in the future. And it's also going to be one of the biggest national security threats that a lot of people feel. And we're seeing a little bit of that right now too, with all the hacking. And in the 2016, there's a whole election scandal that happened. But yeah, so that kind of got me interested a little bit in cybersecurity. Then also a bunch of my friends, like parents and all that, like are there's a big military presence in Tampa with the Special Operations Command and the Central Command over there. And so like I have several friends whose parents are there and all that, and they've told me too, like how big cybersecurity is going to be for national defense, and how the military is really trying to implement that. So I've done a bunch of, I've just been exposed a little bit here and there to that. And then I think what really got me super fascinated with it is the summer of my junior year, I did an internship with the New Jersey State Police in their information technology support unit. And though that wasn't like a cybersecurity unit per se, there definitely was a lot of correlations with that. And like I got to meet the people in the cyber units, and it really opens your eyes when you realize, oh my gosh, a cyber attack can really do a lot of damage, like more than a lot of people think. You know, because I think personally, I think the days of, you know, where like with warfare, we're just kicking down doors and like shooting at each other are slowly moving away from that into the world of cybersecurity and cyber warfare. So my eventual goal is to go into the Department of Defense and do cybersecurity work. And I'm a complete newbie. I mean, I don't have any cyber experience per se, but I'm very open to learning. And so, I mean, yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful introduction. So as you yourself recognized something that I've been saying for a long time, which is that everything is cybersecurity. And the thing is that my definition of cybersecurity is also very broad. Many people equate cybersecurity with security alone, but I don't do that. To me, cybersecurity is the digital strategy of an organization. So cybersecurity to me is business strategy of any organization. Now, what you talked about, for example, in law enforcement, well, in law enforcement, without, again, a digital strategy and a digital trail, because you probably are now solving crime through digital forensics, which is one of the biggest fields now. Again, an aspect of cybersecurity. See, the problem with the word cybersecurity is that it came from the marketing world, and I talk about that in my book also, because and then because it came from the marketing world, the marketing people were always trying to push technology along with it. So that kind of connotation has stuck until people like us are trying to now redefine it the way it's supposed to be. Too many people, then in the past, there's also this InfoSec world, information security world. The people that grew up from that world, they think, oh, cybersecurity is just information security. No, information security is no longer relevant. It's a dead field right now. That was 1991. 2001, already information security was a dead field because information assurance came into being in 2001. And information assurance started talking about perpetual innovation and culture and people, because in information security, it was more focused on compliance, static things. Things weren't changing that much. But then everybody realized that if you don't change, if you don't perpetually improve, you're basically dead in the water. So that concept came. Then in 2014, after I had already finished my doctoral work and everything, I then redefined the term cybersecurity, the way it was being used, and what had happened was information assurance was being replaced by cybersecurity without being redefined. So I redefined it in my book, in various conferences, in various articles, peer-reviewed journals. I did that, and I basically said, look, as a CIO and as a technology strategist for 30 years, I never did anything without looking at the organizational mission. So our strategy has to be mission focused. You see, the old information security model and the information assurance model never looked at the mission. Also never looked at the risk profile of a particular organization. So in other words, they were again focused on doing the same thing for every organization, which never works. They also didn't talk about a governance framework. So in 2014, when I redefined cybersecurity, I talked about cybersecurity as a mission-focused and risk-optimized governance of information, which maximizes confidentiality, integrity, and availability using a balanced mix of people, policy, and technology while perennially improving over time. So this holistic concept now becomes what? The digital strategy of the organization. Because you're, again, focused on the mission, you're powering the mission. See, that is the way the field needs to be looked at. I hope that someday we will stop using the word cybersecurity and just use the word maybe digital strategy.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think especially there's such a connotation that people have in general when they hear the word cybersecurity.
Yes.
You know, and people don't realize the extent, kind of like how you mentioned, for example, digital forensics. Like, there's so many different things you can do in cybersecurity. It's not just one blanket. It's not just one, you know, one term defines all. It's a very broad field, it seems like, with multiple different aspects involved to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is what I was also trying to get Lucy and her people she will try to understand, that they really need to understand the depth and breadth of this field. It is a massive field, not just about security.
Yeah.
The mission comes first. If I cannot succeed in the mission, everything else is useless. Right?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else? This is
fantastic. Yeah. So one of the questions that I have, and I was thinking about, so I know it's been on the news about, you know, there was hacking that, you know, it's like the coronavirus research and all that some time ago, where they're trying to, like, there was I believe they said it was Russia or something was trying to steal, they believe they're trying to steal like coronavirus lab data. So people are starting to realize, I feel more and more in general, how devastating a cyber attack can be, right? Because if you take maybe 10 years ago, I'm not sure the extent of people would have been like, oh, a cyber attack was serious, compared to now, where people are seeing the news, oh my gosh, they're trying to take something. Or the good examples of 2016 elections. You know, it's something, you know, there's a cyber attack, something that hacked in, like, it could really impact us. So now that people are getting a general understanding of it, what would be some proactive steps that cyber professionals can take to keep the general public informed of devastation of cyber attack? Like, because now there's a push to kind of like tell people, like, yeah, I mean, you always have to protect your passwords and all that, but what are some other steps that cybersecurity professionals might be able to take?
I sincerely believe that we're past the point of pointing out devastation, because pointing out devastation is no good, because that has already been done. That's fear, urgency, and danger, FUD, which has been going on for the last 30, 40 years already. That's how billions and billions of dollars of hardware has been sold. I think the thing to do is education, is to help people understand how broad this field is, and continue to educate, continue to converse. So that now that you're learning, you have a sphere of influence. This is the biggest reason why I also started these sets of conversations, because I'm hoping that as these videos start to go out, people are going to read it, listen to it. And this is happening globally already. And I'm hoping that because, say, someone like Lucy appeared here, now hopefully her sphere of influence would listen to this video, and maybe that will start to educate more people. And again, if we can educate 10 people there, those 10 people can educate 10 others. This is my only hope. I believe that we need to spread the right knowledge, because so much of the wrong knowledge is already out there, that the right knowledge is often getting drowned out.
Would you say that the reason that the wrong knowledge is out there is just because of a misunderstanding of like what it is?
More people misunderstand it than the people that understand it. How many people with Doctor of Science in Cybersecurity are there? I bet you it's a handful. Yet you will see that almost every university has a cybersecurity program. How is that possible?
Yeah.
And so what is happening is that you've got PhDs in English or PhDs in social science, PhDs in whatever, running cybersecurity programs.
So do you think then that a cybersecurity degree, like, if that's the case, do you think it's a waste of time? Like, what are some other options then? Because I know, for example, there's boot camps and all that, you know, are still expensive, but they're not nearly as expensive as a degree. Like, what what are some ways that people who are not in the field can kind of put their foot in the door?
That's why I have said that before you spend $5,000 on any university course, or $25,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 in any university program, why don't you spend the $20, $25, at least read my book. So many people have not even read the book, and yet they're spending thousands of dollars. And then after finishing the degree, they say, I can't find a job. And then when I ask them, what is cybersecurity? They don't know how to define it. When I ask them, what did they learn and how it can solve a problem, they don't know. They just took a bunch of courses. When I ask them, okay, I have a healthcare organization and I have a educational organization. I have these two organizations. What kind of a strategy would you do for the healthcare organization? What kind of strategy would you do for the educational organization? They're like stumped.
Yeah.
You see, those kinds of people went through the wrong programs. And there are too many of those, unfortunately.
Do you think that, so going on that point a little bit, because yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I'm sure there's definitely plenty of people, because I've heard stories, you know, like the horror stories of people who have gone through like a degree with something like computer science or cybersecurity, and they come out and they have trouble finding a job. Correct. And I mean, now even with college, I'm a recent college graduate, you know, like it's hard for a lot of college graduates to find a job because there's more layoffs happening than hire-ons that are happening, it feels like. Yeah,
I mean, right now we're in an unfortunate situation, but even a normal market, even before this whole COVID thing, a lot of people were still having problems because of this situation. And unfortunately, many of these people, even when they come to me and they talk to me about mentorship and all that, and I asked them, I said, have you read my book? And they haven't. And I'm thinking, okay, how is it possible for me to help you if you haven't even done that little bit of due diligence? Or they haven't even gone through the videos that are on my website, all free to use. These are, I mean, there's so much free out there. I sincerely believe that anybody who wants to understand cybersecurity today, if they just went through my YouTube channel, they would learn a lot. And it would also help them figure out which university program to go to, because then they will be in a better position to vet the university programs. They'll be able to ask the program chairs and figure out if the program chairs really know anything or not. There are too many program chairs right now that cannot even define cybersecurity. I was at one of those places. Somebody asked me to go to some university because there was this big center for cybersecurity, and they had this big director of cybersecurity, and they were they were getting massive amounts of research money to do things. And then when I asked the director of the program, what is your definition of cybersecurity? He basically said, oh, it's the security of the network. So if a director of that kind of a center bringing in millions of dollars of research money cannot define cybersecurity and thinks it is only the security of the network, don't we have a big problem in our hands? Of course. And to that person, cybersecurity was simply the security aspects of computer science, because his background was computer science, his PhD was computer science, and that's all he knows, and he's never expanded beyond that.
Yeah, and I think that might go back to what we were talking about a little bit in the beginning about how it's such a, you know, I know you were talking about earlier how you know, a cybersecurity expert might not be an expert in everything, but you know a little bit of every single aspect of it. Correct. Just because, I mean, it is so, and honestly, with the way technology is rising, you know, this is something I'm just curious about too. And I know Lucy kind of touched on this on her question, but my question's kind of very similar. So the next 10 years, like, because we're seeing obviously with the COVID-19, everything's technology now. Like everyone's on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything was technology a few years ago, but like now it's expanding so much.
Correct. It is now accelerated.
Exactly. And given how much it's rising, like what do you think is the biggest, do you think, for example, the biggest issue might be a lack of certified professionals in the cybersecurity industry?
It's not the professionals, it's the wrong people are in charge.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to get the right people in charge.
And how do you think we should go about that?
Well, at some point, companies are gonna go out of business. So this is why I was very fascinated by a professor who's basically talking about how the time for reckoning in academia is here now, and it is being accelerated by this COVID crisis, because a lot of academia was basically poo-pooing this online learning. And so many academics, professionals, tenured faculty, people who had these big things, and they've never, now this other problem with academia was many of these professors who have these tenures and everything have never really worked in real life. In other words, they've been a professor their whole life. Well, our field, the cybersecurity field, is so practical oriented that if you have never worked in an organization, you never implemented a cybersecurity strategy, a digital strategy for an organization, I don't know how you teach people. That's a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
I think in this field, you're gonna need practitioner scholars who have had deep experiences in the field in a variety of organizations running these kinds of programs. That is the only way we're going to create better educated professionals who are ready to go to work day one. Why are some of my graduates winning awards, which is unprecedented, right? Last year, one of my graduates won the America's Information Security Leadership Award as a rising star. In 2020, another one of my graduates. So why is that? Imagine the number of graduates that there are in the world. How come my graduates are doing that? What is so different about them? The difference is they have learned from a practitioner scholar, and all of the project's work, everything that they did was practical oriented. When you go to talk to them about cybersecurity, they're not going to tell you, oh, it's the protection of the network, or it is the security aspects of computer science. They're going to tell you what I just explained, the holistic thing, and they already know how to build their brand. They did that. They've already created multiple sources of income, so they did that, and that is why they got known, and that is why they got the awards, because nobody's going to get an award without really contributing knowledge to the field and building their brand. Because how do people know about you? If you don't contribute to the field, if you don't contribute your knowledge to the field, nobody knows about you. So you're never going to win any awards.
Yeah, and I mean, you hear it all. Like branding is such an important thing for anybody.
It is the most important thing.
Yeah, because I mean, it's so, I feel in the end, like these days, especially, like your skill set or whatever can only get you so far. Like if you just go based off your regular skill set or whatever you have, depending on, your certifications and all that, it can only take you so far.
Yes. And branding will start to also refine your thoughts. Because when you start talking about it, sharing the knowledge, like the best way to prove that you know something is to teach and explain it to somebody else. You will find that your own knowledge is refined so well. And there is nothing to prevent people like you even, Vivek, you just understood this part that you worked in this crime organization or a police organization. Well, you could write something without necessarily revealing too much, but you could write this revelation that came upon you, that you recognized how broad this field is. That's an article waiting to be written, Vivek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something interesting that I need to,
Yes, you need to. Everybody needs to do that. As you learn something, start sharing it. And you can write a LinkedIn blog. You will find that your voice starts to become refined and more prominent. That is how all my graduates who have built brands for themselves have done. So I've told them to speak at conferences, apply to speak at conferences. It's amazing. Even my undergraduate students were doing that.
Wow.
All right.
It's awesome.
All right. Well, fantastic chatting with you. I am going to shut the recording now and we can go into the networking portion. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you.